Lovely. Well, I say welcome to the first episode of the Purple Heart podcast. I'm here with Ben West. Thank you much for coming on.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, it's the first one, so I guess we're just the idea is just to get a conversation going about, well, especially mental health, because of everything that's going on right now. We want to kind of normalise and everyone to just talk about how they really feel, and so we can get to the root of some of these problems.
Absolutely.
So the first thing, just want to introduce yourself, what you do on like your Instagram page and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ben West. I'm a mental health campaigner, and very tragically in 2018, my younger brother Sam took his own life just before his GCSEs. And really before then I didn't know what mental health was. I'd never really heard of it before. And suddenly after Sam died, I realised that almost everyone I knew was suffering with something. They were going through something that they didn't want anyone to know about. And so for me, from that day, I just realised that I wanted to do something to help those people have those conversations and reach out and talk about mental health a little bit more. And then, you know, the further I dug into it, the more I realised that actually there were so many different things that were actually creating a really bad environment for people. Not only were we not talking, but the support just wasn't there. Universities ended up not being very good. You know, my first big campaign was around teachers and teacher training, because I found out that teachers don't actually receive any training on mental health at all during their teacher training, which is just ridiculous because, you know, they're taught how to use an EpiPen in case a child eats a nut and goes into anaphylactic shock, but they're not taught about mental health, self-harm, suicide, and you've got hundreds of thousands of kids self-harming now. You've got, you know, 200 school-age children dying from suicide every year. And so for me it was like, right, let's sort that out, let's get that sorted. And so it's just been a bit of a snowball since then, to be honest with you. And obviously, you know, Instagram's been where everything's sort of taken place and where I've like pushed it all out on. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey, and now we've got to a point now where we're trying to really actually push for some proper change on a big large scale, which is just awesome.
Nice. Because like you just mentioned about the EpiPen, it's I think what's really hard about mental health is because it's on the inside, so it's really hard to detect and then be able to solve. So it's it makes it like such a much more complex problem.
Yeah, it's so difficult to understand as well, because even me, and I talk about this almost every day, I find mental health so difficult to understand. Yeah. Right? Because you think about your brain, and this is what happened. Like, my brother was diagnosed with depression, and I remember my mum told me that. Right. And I was like, how can you be diagnosed with how can you be diagnosed with SAD? That's an emotion. And I just didn't understand it. And even now, I'm like, a lot of these mental health conditions, I struggle to understand what's actually going on. And I think that's a real point here, because often we tell people, talk about your mental health. How can you when you don't understand?
Don't really understand.
You know, I've had this so many times where I'm feeling a certain way, but I can't articulate that to someone. I've got no idea what's going on. And this is why I think, you know, one of the things I really want to see happen is more education around mental health within schools, right from the age of 4 years old. Because I always like this this sort of way of looking at it, which is that, you know, not teaching young people about mental health and then expecting them to deal with a mental health problem is like not teaching young people how to read, and then one day when they're 22 giving them a Charles Dickens novel and being like, there you go on, read it.
That's a really good way to look at it.
Right, that's exactly, we're just setting people up to fail. We're not giving them the tools to be able to deal with the everyday stresses. So I really think that we owe it to our young people now to actually educate them about mental health, so that they have those tools, so that if something happens, they know roughly how to react, and also so they can have those conversations and understand how they're feeling.
Oh, yeah, I really agree. And like I said, it's such a common thing, so everyone should be equipped with the necessary skills to be able to deal with these things. And like you said, like when you experience something like losing a friend, then it does open your eyes and makes you realise so many other people are dealing with all these demons, and stay quiet about it. And you look around and you think there is so much pain, there is so much suffering, and there clearly needs, like, it's people are screaming out like something needs to change, something needs to happen. And I think what you're doing, or what I'm trying to do as well, is just trying to tackle that just one day at a time and just make the best out of it.
That's it. And I think, like, just to say, like, I think everything all of you have done is just absolutely amazing. Thank you. From day one, honestly, like seeing that post that everyone was sharing around, trying to find Elisa, and the push for that, and then every single day since, you know, for me, I've just been a kind of observer to all of it, and just seeing what's going on and seeing the people's reactions. I've been lucky enough to speak to a lot of you and learn about Elisa and learn about you guys, and I just think it's just absolutely awe-inspiring what you guys have done.
Thank you very much.
And I know know nothing can make it easier what's happened, but it's just absolutely incredible to see how everyone's come together and tried to do something to help and try and make something positive out of it. And I just think it is absolutely amazing, and it's something that I definitely saw when I lost Sam, was a similar sort of reaction of everyone trying to find something positive and find something positive and trying to take something positive away. But I really do mean it when I say, I was seeing some of the posts online, I just think this is just amazing what you guys are doing. And I think it's likewise with this podcast, it's just such an incredible tool, because we really do need change. We really, really do. And I think sometimes we forget how far we've got left to go with mental health, and I sometimes do as well. You know, sometimes I see myself being like, oh, it's all going really well, you know, I've changed this legislation, teachers are now getting trained, brilliant, we're on the road, and then something like this happens and it's just like knocks you back to square one. You're like, where did this go wrong, where did this happen, you know, how can we still be losing so many people in this way? But yeah, you're right, day by day, task by task, goal by goal, you know, campaign by campaign, slowly we'll just chip away at every different level of society and try and change it, because there's a lot that needs to happen before we can actually really tackle this.
I think what's good now is people are starting to realise how much of a crazy thing it is. Like when Instagram first started, it was just, I don't know, just posts about what you had for breakfast, or just like the sun's out and stuff. But now, like, you see a lot of people's stories, it's mental health this, mental health that. So a lot of people are waking up, and it seems like we're in the beginning of like a big change that's coming. And now that everyone's kind of getting better at talking about it, I feel like we can really, like, I don't know, just things starting to get better, and that's what it looks like from social media and stuff.
It is, isn't it? Because it's so lovely, because I don't think that definitely wouldn't have happened a few years ago. And I think social media, and especially Instagram, has become such an amazing place for people to actually push these messages, and for me, I've seen it firsthand. People are so willing to just engage with what I'm saying on Instagram. It's just incredible. And I mean, we see it with Pride and Black Lives Matter and all these campaigns. And I always love how, because a lot of people complain about young people being called snowflakes, and in part, like, I get why we get annoyed by that, but you know what, I think being called a snowflake is brilliant, because it really sums up the young generation really well. Because we are individual snowflakes, right? And people are delicate, but we come together, and we've seen it over the last year, we come together, we're an avalanche, right? And we'll go through a village, we'll smash down houses, we'll smash down things, and we are forced to be reckoned with. And so that's young people, and you see it every day on social media. You know, the change that's happening because people have voices on social media is just massive, and it's become such a massive platform for change. So you're absolutely right, and I think social media has obviously, in my case, has been such a massive tool for actually getting to where I've been. You know, there's no chance I would have got to Downing Street or met the Prime Minister if I hadn't had that army of people behind me. So yeah, it's really, really positive. And also for me, you know, seeing what's going on is, a lot of the time there's people say a lot about this, like, stigma around mental health, and I think that still very much exists, but it's really lovely to see so many people sharing stuff about mental health. Right, yeah. Because to me, I just think, imagine if I was struggling and my friend shared this post. Yeah. Like, immediately you're like, okay, people do understand, right?
And it could just be like that one post could be the difference between someone taking their own life. They could get a really good message from that post and realise, wow, I should be doing this, I should be doing that, and it could literally save a life.
Yeah, and this is as well, it's always one thing. So I tell that to people, you know, there's so much that we can all do to try and change this culture around it, and start chipping away at that stigma, and sharing stuff like this online, sharing, you know, the numbers. I would do a lot of work with Shout 85258, which is the crisis text line in the UK that you can text anytime, day or night, for free, to get free support over text. Right. And just sharing things like that just slowly makes a culture where people are like, they feel supported. And
these new things start to become the norm, and then everyone kind of, we like lift up together, which is quite nice.
Exactly.
And I like your metaphor about the snowflakes. Like, we do get called snowflakes, but like I said, individuals coming together and really making a change is a good way to look at it, actually. That's quite good. And you mentioned you met the Prime Minister. How did that come about? What was that?
Oh dear, right. So I had this petition to get mental health training for teachers, right? And I was invited to London for this event with the Sun newspaper. Right,
and when was this, sorry?
This was November 2019,
right,
I believe.
So you were...
So I was 19.
19 years old.
And I arrived at this event, and to be totally honest with you, all I knew about the event was it was a free bar.
Right.
Okay. So I took my mate from uni, and we just kind of went for the champagne and the Prosecco, and it was a dinner, and we got to this table where we were sitting for dinner, and I was like, there's my name, there's Paul's name. And then it was the Right Honourable Boris Johnson. And I was like, oh, hold on a second. And then this Sun journalist came up to me and was like, hi Ben, hope you're enjoying the evening. Don't know whether you're aware, but the Prime Minister's coming tonight. Right. And I was like, yeah, I've just seen, mate. Like, and it's just like, he'd also like to speak to you after the event. So I was like, well, this is bizarre.
Crazy.
I was like, put down the Prosecco, right? Can someone get me some water? Yeah. And then, yeah, we had the evening, and then I went into this room after the event. I had quite a lot to drink, right. In fairness. It was quite a good event. And I sat down in this chair and I realised this whole press team was there, and we had this camera set up. And I was like, oh, okay, wow. So this is what he meant by our conversation. And I just started talking to him on camera, and I just realised like halfway through, I was like, when am I ever going to be able to speak to a Prime Minister on camera ever again? And he is like on the record here. And so I just remembered, I don't know where I got the confidence from, I just called him and I was like, I've got this petition. We think that teachers should be trained in mental health. What do you think? And he was like, and you can see actually when you watch it back, like he looks around to his advisor, and they're just like this, and he's like, yeah, I love it, great idea. And then basically the cameras turned off, and I went up to his team, and I was like, that's what happens now. Yeah. And they gave me their cards, and then as I got back to Liverpool, the next day, I literally opened my door, and I got an email from the Prime Minister's office being like, can you come to Downing Street tomorrow? Hand all the petition signatures in and spent the day in Downing Street talking about, making your legislation.
Wow.
So yeah, all came about from a glass of Prosecco. So,
so there we go. Drinking is good for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's crazy. It must be so surreal. Like 19 years old, you're in Downing Street, you're talking to the...
Oh, it was unbelievable as well. And you know what the best moment of that was? I had... the signatures. We had 210,000 signatures at the time, which was just mind-blowing. But each signature had an individual's name, and we printed all of the names off into this box. Right. And I remember standing at the steps of Downing Street with this box, handing it to the Prime Minister in front of the press, shaking his hand. And I just I was fighting back tears, to be honest with you. Yeah. Because for me, like, this came from such a painful place. And to be able to stand there with the leader of our country, calling for change, that so many people had, like, entrusted me with that job of doing, it was just the most overwhelming sense of, like, achievement and pride.
That's amazing, yeah.
It was just unbelievable to know that I was actually, because a lot of the time, you have ideas, you put stuff out there, and it's very difficult to actually see the real impact. Yeah. And for me there, it was like, wow, real people are involved in this, and we're helping real people, and that was just the most magical thing.
Well done to you. That's just unreal. I didn't know like it happened like that, to be fair. So it's just crazy. And it just goes to show like one individual and how much change they can make. And like I said, when we all come together, around individuals all working towards the same goal, we can just achieve anything.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It just kind of gives power to us, which is what we need at this time. So
definitely, we're a force. We are a force. Boris hasn't done anything. I will just add that he's still sitting on it.
2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Right, yeah. But I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction.
That's it. It is a step in the right direction. And you're getting into Parliament, meeting people. I've got contacts in Downing Street now. Like I can just email them, being like, I've got this idea. We've got this going on. Can you help?
And
absolutely. And also, what we're seeing as well with that campaign is the government's not necessarily introduced legislation for it, but a lot of teacher training institutions saw that and were like, right, we're going to do it anyway.
Exactly.
So actually, it's always lovely. I get messages quite a lot of the time of teachers that are like, I just had my mental health first aid training today. Yay. And it's like a little small win.
And it's the thing, like it's hard to see the reward, because obviously the downside of all this stuff is like when someone takes their own life, but it's hard to see when someone doesn't. So even though it might look like not much is happening, you could be saving hundreds, thousands of lives without even realising. So it's just amazing what you're doing, just like keep it up, really.
No, thank you. Well, I don't intend to going anywhere. I feel like I'm into far too deep to get anywhere now. Like,
stop now.
But it is amazing. It is really, really amazing. And you're right. It is sometimes quite difficult because you don't see the impact. Yeah. But you definitely see the failure.
There you go.
And on a personal note, when I heard about Elisa, when I heard about Finn Kitson, and all the other people I hear about, it hits me personally, because I'm like, I'm in that space. I'm trying to stop that. And that's, I think, what hits me so personally. It's like, what could I have done differently? And it's something I'm trying very hard not to blame myself for. Yeah. Especially given the sort of emotions that I have to go through and the sort of damage I've had through suicide. 100%. When something like this goes on, I'm like, what did I miss? What could I have done differently? Exactly.
And that's what's so hard. Like, you can ask yourself that question so many times and never like arrive at like a true answer, and it can be damaging. But I guess you just have to keep using it as motivation. Like, I have helped these people.
Yeah.
And when you hear about these like tragic news, it just kind of fuels you more to do better, to do greater things, to try harder, and it just kind of fuels you to keep going, which is, it's sad, but it's also like, it's kind of bittersweet in a way.
Yeah.
But so talking about suicide just in general and what happened with your brother, do you want to talk me through that a bit? Like, how old are you when you found out? And
yeah, so that was awful. So I was 17 at the time. Yeah, I was 17. And so, like I said, Sam was diagnosed with depression in September 2017 when he was 15 years old, and then took his own life in January 2018.
Right.
Very, very, very unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Like I say, I didn't even know what mental health was at that point. So to think that he was going to die, it was just like, I couldn't even comprehend that. That was not something that I thought was going to happen. And it was a huge, huge, huge shock for everyone. Even because he was under treatment for that as well. He was luckily we were able to put him to private counselling.
Okay.
So he was getting counselling. And even, his counsellor was like, he's doing really well.
Right.
So even she was really shocked that it happened. And I think that just shows how fragile these illnesses are and fragile mental health is. 1 minute you can be doing
and how deceiving they are as well.
Exactly. And then suddenly something can happen and it just triggers something, and it's so difficult. And this is why I think we need so much better understanding of it. And to paint a little bit of a picture, the way we beat or are beating cancer is through research, right? The way we're beating cancer is through research. We now have such a massive understanding of cancer that the drugs, the treatment is much, much better than it was years ago, right? Yeah. With mental health, the Mental Health Foundation has come out and said that there is a chronic underfunding of mental health research. And so we're pumping loads of money into sort of reaction, treatment, and care, and sort of awareness campaigns, but very little into research. And I always think, are we missing something there? Because if we've changed this dial on cancer by researching it, with mental health, if you go to the doctor and they prescribe you with medication, it's still trial and error. It's try this, see what it does, come back in 3 weeks. Because for some people it will be brilliant, for other people it may make them worse. They don't know what's going to happen. How can we possibly be okay with that?
How can that be a solution? Yeah.
Exactly. You wouldn't go to the doctor with cancer and they're like, try this, come back in 3 weeks' time.
It's just,
it might make it grow bigger, it might die. No, right? We wouldn't do that, and we don't do that. It's so bad. And also, talking about the sort of research side and the medical side, so many people, and it is alarming how many people, and I know this is true for university mental health services as well, are turned away because it's not bad enough.
Really?
Imagine for a second, if we continue the comparison with cancer, if you went to your doctor with cancer and they said, I'm really sorry, but it's only the size of a pea, so we're not going to do anything.
Ridiculous.
Come back when you're a little bit more ill. Come back when you've had a seizure. Yeah. That's what we're doing with mental health. We're waiting until people are dying or at the point where they do want to die until they get any treatment. And that is just awful. That's not how we treat things. Yeah. Imagine if we did that with cancer. Imagine what the mortality rate would be.
Ridiculous.
And we're shocked that it's so high with mental health and suicide. So there is so much work we need to do. And like I say, with my brother, there was so little awareness for me. I'd never learned about this before. So I think just generally as a society we need to do more to learn about mental health more.
Exactly.
Both professionally, medically, and also teaching kids, giving them that emotional literacy as well.
And it just goes to show how deceiving it really is, because even someone so close to you and you can still have no idea that was going to happen. So then people that are even further away from you, what are the chances that you're going to be able to help them? So you sometimes you can feel really helpless. But I think, like I said, people are starting to make a bit of a difference now. People start to get onto, wake up and realise, something seriously wrong is happening right now and change needs to be made. Yeah. But I just wanted to ask you about, so obviously the tragic thing that happened, how did you end up dealing with the grief or dealing with, trying to wrap your head around what happened and stuff? What was your process of that?
Wow. I mean, if you'd asked me that, and people did ask me that 3 years ago when I lost him, I would have said, I'm coping really well, I'm doing all this campaign stuff, I'm seeing my friends. Truth is, that was an absolute lie. And I think I lied for a good year, because I was not okay. And I was really, really, really good at smiling and saying the right words.
Right.
But under the surface, I wasn't at all. I think my way of coping back then was fill my time and just stop it from hurting, right? Just fill my time with stuff to go on. So campaigning, I had A-level revision, which I didn't do, but fill my time with other stuff,
Right.
and sort of just filling it. So I was busy, and I thought that was how I was coping, but really what I was doing was just sort of distracting myself. Yeah, and so it was only recently actually I started getting counselling end of last year,
Right.
and sort of learning about emotions and expressing emotions, and actually that's been the moment where I'm like, yeah, I actually need to actually sometimes do less
100%.
to cope.
Yeah.
And my counsellor told me something that's stuck with me like every day since she told me, and she was like, Ben, what are you doing to look after yourself? And I was like, I went for a run this morning, I would listen to music, I did this, I ate a nice and healthy lunch and all this stuff. And she was like, whoa, stop. We're human beings, not human doings. Stop doing things to make you feel good.
Right.
Start just being. And it's such a good point. Like, we hear a lot about expressing our emotions, and sometimes the best thing we can do is just literally sit there, not do anything, and just feel what you need to feel, right? And I think this is the sort of thing that we need to be taught in schools.
Definitely, yeah.
Because a knee-jerk reaction of most people is, that doesn't feel nice to think about, that doesn't feel nice to think about, let's just do something, go for a run, go and do something, go see my mates, put on some music, instead of actually,
dealing with it properly.
Yeah, dealing with and noticing what's going on.
I think because obviously what happened with my friend, and then people ask like, how you doing, and I don't know if I'm lying to myself or I actually am okay, but when people say, so what have you been doing, like you said, I've been keeping myself incredibly busy the whole month of May. I was just, every single day I was doing something, I was going out here, I was being with people. I don't know if that was just for comfort and for people around me maybe not feel alone. But sometimes when you are alone and you've got like a song on and one little thing to remind you that the emotions come flooding in, and I guess some people might get like scared of that, or like I said, it's unpleasant, so they don't want to go through that. So okay, I'll distract, I'll go for a run, I'll go work out, I'll go see a friend of mine, I'll go for a drink or something, just to try and keep your like mind distracted. But you said we're human beings, not doing, which is another good way to look at it. So sometimes you just have to take a step back and kind of a bit of self-reflection, a bit of self-analysis, and realise what you're doing the right thing, and should you be doing something else. So.
Yeah, and also I think you've got to trust the process.
Yeah.
And actually sometimes distracting yourself is probably a good thing. All you've got to remember is the organ up here, your brain, is very, very old, and it's like made us survive and thrive so well. It knows what it's doing, right? It knows to an extent what it's doing. And I think a lot of times and I found myself doing this a lot when I lost Sam, is kind of doubting my brain and doubting what I was thinking and doubting how I was reacting and going, should I be doing this, should I be doing that? And really I think we need to have so much more trust in
and just
our
kind
brain.
of listen to it and make sure and just trust
exactly. It knows what it's doing, it knows what it wants to tell us, right? And so sometimes I think just having some trust in, and I know when I lost Sam, the grief and the guilt for me was massive. Like I was his older brother, I should have been there. And I'm sure a lot of people with Olisa are probably thinking the same thing. What could I have said, what could I have done differently? And that is as natural as smiling. That is a part of grief. That is well documented as a very, very, very natural emotion. And it has been for our entire existence. That's grief, right? And I think we just need to have trust in our brain, trust in the process.
And trust in time as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you want to distract yourself, fine. It's your brain trying to avoid those things. But it's important to realise that sometimes when it works for you, when you feel comfortable doing it, sitting back and just feeling how your brain wants you to feel, and just stopping yourself from that knee jerk. Let's fill it with time. But guilt and shame are really damaging emotions, and I think when we're talking about how we react to certain situations, it can be really easy to sort of blame ourselves and feel shamed about how we're reacting to it. I know when I lost Sam, there were periods of time where I felt nothing. Right. Which I struggled with actually for a long time, because I was like, how can I feel nothing? I mean, for example, when we called 999, I had no emotion. I actually laughed I was doing CPR and I was laughing and making jokes with the 999 call handler. And then in grief, there was periods where I just felt so numb. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel sad. And I remember that really hurt me, because I kept doubting myself and being like, well, I can't have loved him.
Yeah, am I crazy? Like,
Yeah.
am I a psychopath? Like,
Exactly.
I should be depressed every day and crying.
And it gets into that such a vicious cycle where it's just blame, making shame, making blame, and it's just horrible cycle. So trust in the organ and in the brain is a thing I learned, and it's really helpful because it does know a lot more than you think it does.
And not to be scared of the emotions that you're going through, because some people might be scared of being sad or scared of like coming to terms with what's happened. So you just kind of have to trust yourself and just kind of work through it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so just like dealing with grief, that's a good way to do it. Just trusting yourself and not expecting too much of yourself as well, because like you said, we're humans, like, and things like this are just so hard to wrap your head around. There's no point trying to say, well, I don't understand this. You just kind of have to like let you kind of figure it out slowly as you go. And sometimes you might not even understand it ever, but you learn to live with it.
Absolutely. And also a big one, and I know this is something we talk about a lot, is knowing when it's time to reach out and tell someone they're not feeling okay.
Yeah.
And I got this, I know you've been lucky with the people you've been around, and I certainly was with my friends, that any time I was feeling down and really down, I knew that I could just send them a quick text to me. Like, for me back then, it was like, I didn't even want to talk to you, I just wanted a shoulder to cry on. And that was really lovely. And I actually think so many people, especially men, feel like it's weak to admit like they don't have everything together.
Right.
And I can say, like, I hear the side of the people's lives that no one else does. So many people feel like they can tell me everything and I'm not going to judge them, which I love, which is great. But it's always fun because I'm like, I can't believe you make it look like everything's together. And I've almost come to realise that no one really has everything together.
Exactly, yeah.
No one knows what they're doing.
Nobody does.
Especially when you're leaving uni, no one really goes, oh yeah, this is all working out for me, or leaving school, everyone's like, oh, this is perfect. No one does. But especially as men, we've kind of been taught to be like, we don't let on to that. I'm self-sufficient, I can look after myself.
We have all the answers.
Yeah, I've got it all together, I'm working it out. So
why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a pressure on men to always have the answers and always to stand strong?
I've got no idea. I think historically men have always been like designed, or not designed, but taught to be like stoic and don't show emotions, and you've got to go out and catch a rabbit for dinner and supply and be that one, and I guess maybe in the past when we were hunter-gatherers and catching animals, that's probably an attractive feature.
Yeah, exactly.
But now, that's just damaging. It's not helpful. But I do think the biology of men and that sort of societal view of what men should be, which is stoic, emotionless, strong, athletic type. It's just outdated.
It is outdated, but I just, like I said, the biology of it, because it's so like deep rooted in us. It's really hard to get away from it. But I think talking about it and realising, like, man, you don't have to do this, you can cry, you can talk about your feelings, we'll slowly start to get out of it. But I think it's quite like a tough stigma to shake. Yeah,
absolutely. And also women, like, let's encourage men to do that. We've got to make this an attractive feat. And I always think, like, people often think the person crying and looking like they've got everything going wrong, they are the mentally healthy person in the room,
because they can deal with
they are
emotions.
able to. Right, you've got to almost be worried for the person that's not doing that, the person that's happy. Same with Sam. I don't know about Lisa, but it was the same with Sam. Sam was the bubbliest, happiest person you've ever met, and that should almost be a warning sign. Yeah. Because if for the person that is openly emotional, then they are arguably the more emotionally healthy person, right?
Because they're dealing with it, they're expressing it, they're not keeping it all bottled up. Like with Elisa, like, just always smiling, always laughing, always helping everyone. So you think, he's got his head screwed on. Yeah. Nothing like this would ever happen to him. The last person would happen to is someone like this. But like I said, I guess it is kind of an indicator to that someone's not okay, because they haven't cried for a long time. They haven't. I remember one time after a party, we were talking like late at night, 2:00 in the morning or something. Yeah. And that was one time that he did open up, and like a single tear ran down his face, and like seeing that for the first time, I was like, this is so not Elisa. But it just goes to show that that's always there. But he's got this big, strong front in front of him, and it makes you like kind of guilty to see, like, well, clearly he was struggling, and what could he have done differently, or reached out more, or said just make sure he was okay. But if you were to ask, he'd say he was fine. So it's really hard to notice something when they really don't want to show it.
It's so true, and I mean, I'm still there. I've definitely been there. The sort of what could I have done? Could I have asked that question? And you're so right. Sometimes people just, you can ask that question as many times as you like.
Yeah.
But if they think that they're going to be judged for saying something, they're not going to say anything. The only time back at school when I realised this was a problem, the only time I actually heard those stories was in confidence. When people messaged me being like, this is in confidence, but this has happened. And I'm like, that's so sad. And this is what really actually what made me want to go into this and start having these conversations, is because I saw so many people not talking about this. And I saw friends, like friend groups, and where one friend would tell me this story about what they're going through. I think it was anorexia they were going through. And then another friend from the same friend group told me pretty much the same story. And I was like, neither of you know that you two close friends are going through exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so powerful. Like, how can we make those two people have that conversation with each other? And so I started, with my campaign. I got people out on a walk. We walked to London. We got people to talk about their mental health. Made them feel comfortable. We dressed in bright pink. We made it like a happy conversation, right? A conversation that was cool and trendy. And the impact of that was just massive. And so it says a lot about not necessarily asking the questions, but giving people that environment that makes them feel safe to answer it.
Yeah, inviting them, making it open for them to feel like they, without needing to ask them, they can just open up for themselves.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm trying to do with universities at the moment. Yeah. It's one thing having a mental health support service that goes, we're here if you need. Yeah, exactly. It's an entirely different one to look at the structure, the society and the culture around universities and go, right, how do we make this more inclusive? How do we make this more comfortable for people that are struggling? How can we make them actually access that service? Because at the moment there's a massive barrier, which is that stigma that stops people from actually getting support.
That makes sense, because I've seen a few things what you said about universities, and whenever it comes to that topic, I always think like, well, what can a university do if the person's not even going to speak to their own best friend? How could a university, something so big, help? But like you've just mentioned, it's about creating an environment where they feel free and have an opportunity to go and talk to them, or talk to anyone, which will then like reduce the chances of something bad like this happening. So, so what do you think the universities are doing or could be doing? Because I know you've got quite a...
Yeah, how long do you have?
As long as you want, mate.
Oh, God. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of work over the last year even, around universities. I think the death of Finn Kitchen in Manchester was the starting point. There was like, right, what's going on? What's going on here? And the more I've spoken about it, the more I've learned. It's just absolutely shocking. So universities, right, to paint the broad picture, universities have a duty of care. So in law, they have to, by law, protect your health, safety and well-being of everyone that has anything to do with the university, right? That's staff, that's workers, that's cleaners, that's students, everyone. So in the same way as if they badly maintain stairs and you tripped over the stairs and fell and broke a leg, then they're liable to be sued. In the same way, they have a responsibility to put the systems in place that protects people's well-being, especially with universities, because they are a contributing factor in people's mental health 100%. Because they're supplying the pressure, right? So they have a real responsibility to look after people's mental health. What we found over the last year in particular is that they have been acting illegally, right? There's no other way of saying it. They've been acting illegally. Right. They've been denying that they've got that responsibility to look after people's mental health. So what I'd like to see is, and actually I've got some research coming out soon about it to back all this up, we want to see a holistic approach to university mental health. Because for too long, it's been this tick box. It's like, we're doing our job, we've got a mental health support service, it's there. Okay.
We've got a poster on the wall.
How do I get there? Who do I talk to? How do I get an appointment? How do you have that initial conversation if everything is telling you not to? And there's so many different things that I want to change. I mean, there's a massive list. I've got a list of so many things that I think should happen in universities. I mean, for starters, I think every student-facing member of staff should be trained in mental health first aid, in the same way they are first aid. I think that student support should be available with far less waiting times than they do have already, because they are, for a lot of universities, quite long still. Universities by law, and this is a key one, by law must have access to a nighttime access to mental health support,
Right.
because only a certain number of universities have Nightline, which is a student mental health support service at night. Some have the Shower Crisis text line, and others don't have anything at all.
Right.
And so if you're a student struggling at 2 o'clock in the morning, your choices are either an ambulance service or A&E.
Yeah.
And that's
And it needs to be in all universities, because imagine if we live in a world where, depending on what university you go to, could affect if you take your own life or not, and that's just something that should never be a thing.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what I'm saying, because it's become exactly that. It's like rolling a dice, and no one even thinks about this when they apply to. I didn't, and I was involved with this mental health stuff when I applied to university. I didn't think about this. I had no idea, and so actually, I've got a petition out at the moment to make the league tables, national league tables, include mental health support as part of their criteria, because at the moment they only look at academic support and academic excellence.
Yeah, and you want to know where you're going. They're going to be able to support you.
Yeah, that's only half the challenge. That's only half what you're going there for. Because if you've got access to the best academic support in the world, that means absolutely nothing if you can't get yourself out of bed or do the work because you're burnt out.
100%.
Right? It doesn't mean anything. So a university has to recognise that they've got a responsibility for both. But you look on the league tables; they're not critiqued in it at all. They're not measured on mental health support at all. None of the league tables do. I think there was one done in 2017, and it hasn't happened again since. Right. And I'm thinking, it's okay for every us and me to look at that, and it's a helpful thing to know about. But for people that are in CAMS, in the mental health service already, looking at universities, you're right. How do you pick a university that's going to best support your needs? You can't. There's nothing you can look at to do that. And also, a league table is great because it has a top 3.
There you go.
And this is about highlighting people that are doing things well. And universities are brilliant at innovating if it knows they're going to beat their competition. We know how they get so horny over the league tables, don't they? Exactly. It's everywhere. It's plus on every wall. It's like, oh my God, we were 3rd in this, we were 27th in this. And so it's a bit weird, actually.
About helping mental health,
let's put a mental health banner on it. Wow, suddenly they're competing for it. Doesn't that change the playing field a little bit?
Yeah.
So we're going to try and hit it where they want.
Where they care.
Yeah, exactly where they care. And we'll try and do it that way.
Yeah, that's really good actually. And it's tricky with university. Because I've never been myself, but I'm sure for a lot of people it's the first time they're away from their parents.
Yeah.
Introduced to different substances that they probably never experienced before, and plus all the hard work, which is a big step up. I'm sure all of that really does affect their mental health, and you can shed any light on that at all.
Oh, yeah, I mean, look at the last year. I will not ever understand how difficult this year has been for some people. Coming to university, living away from home for the first time ever, going away from your parents for the first time ever, being in a new city, not knowing your way around, and then being forced to isolate with people that you don't necessarily like. Yeah. I've heard so many really desperate stories from people this year that have just been at the absolute limit because of the coronavirus pandemic, especially at universities. And to be honest with you, I think that shows how little universities really understand about this. Because I said when we found out we were going back to university in September last year, I said, and I made it so clear, I said it so many times on my Instagram, if you are struggling over the next few months at university, go home. Don't even think about university. Don't even think about the coronavirus restrictions. Go home, right? I think it was an absolute failure of both government and universities to make it mandatory for university students to go back to university just so they can be locked up in their accommodation. I think it's, yes, for a lot of people that was okay. For me, it was okay. I was a bit lonely when I was isolating, but that wasn't too bad. Yeah. For so many people, that became life or death.
Yeah.
And I don't think universities realise that, because they just don't recognise that it's something they need to think about.
Yeah.
And until every single decision made at university and at government, until we have someone at the back, every single decision, and just puts their hand up and goes, have we thought about mental health? What's this going to do? It was the same with Manchester when they put the fences up. No one thought about mental health. That's what we need. We need one person that just goes, let's just take a second. Is this going to impact people's mental health? If so, what can we do alongside this to stop that from happening? Going back to university in September last year should never have happened. And I think if they really analysed people's mental health and what that would do to people's mental health, it would never have happened. Right. So I think that speaks volumes about really what needs to happen, because this is leadership that is failing to recognise this as something that's important.
Yeah, and it's sad that it takes bad things for bad things that happened for us to then realise, oh, we should put this in place, should put that in place. But it is kind of research in itself. So like from the beginning, people aren't, how are they supposed to know this is going to affect you in this way and that and this way? So it's just sad that people do get affected negatively, but the quicker we pick up on it and the quicker we can make changes, then the more people we can help in the long run and stuff. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So just talking about, because we talked about isolation, how do you think the coronavirus was for people's mental health in general and in universities, or just people that stayed at home and stuff?
I think it's so mixed, because on the one hand, I think, like I said just then, it's had such a massive impact on certain individuals. You know, the loneliness, we've seen loneliness like we've never seen it. It's absolutely awful. And I think actually on the one hand, it's been terrible. And I think, you know, not just even what we've seen over the last year, but in the years to come, as an impact of coronavirus, the job market, you know, the living situations, the grief, the trauma that we've seen in the NHS, all of that will slowly play out over the next few years. And I think that's going to be devastating for a lot of people. However, if you're looking for a sort of positive out of this year, we are talking about this so much more now. It's on the TV. Every time you go on the TV, there's a message about mental health. On the radio, it's everywhere. You know, on social media, it's everywhere. And that is a positive. We are talking. This podcast's happening, and I think that's an amazing thing. You know, and things like this are happening much, much more now. I think people are becoming more aware of mental health and the need to have these conversations and the need for change. And I think that's a really, really positive thing. But I'm scared for a lot of people that have lost jobs, that are entering the adult life without many job prospects. You know, that have had to deal with the deaths of grandparents in isolation. They've had to deal with death everywhere. They've, you know, NHS staff that have had to have the most traumatic, and the more I've spoken to a lot of NHS staff, and it just sounds absolutely awful what they've had to go through this year. I think there's been so much trauma over last year that it's just that's going to play out eventually. And
I think there'll be a lot of lessons learned from it as well, because even my mum, she works at NHS and she was on the front lines for a bit, and she was saying it's literally like a war zone. It was just horrific.
Awful,
and so all we can do is learn from these big things and just try and prevent them from ever happening again. But again, it is just so tricky because there's such big complex issues that we're dealing with. But like you said, a lot of people are talking about it now, and once everyone starts to really understand that there's something at play here, then I think like we can really make a real difference, and maybe one day like suicide won't even be a thing anymore, and that's just kind of all kind of working towards. I definitely believe that one day that we won't have to have these conversations. I definitely do, and I mean it's just my life's work to try and do as much as I can to get towards that figure, because I think it's just the most devastating thing. I don't think there's any situation that is more devastating than having someone driven to that point. I think it's absolutely awful, and we should be doing so much more than we already are to stop that from happening and stop people getting to that point. And it is literally conversation by conversation. We're going to get there step by step, person by person, you know, goal by goal. We will get there. We absolutely will. But it takes all of us, right? Like we said about the snowflake and avalanche thing, we need to do that. And it's so amazing that so many people behind this, and now, especially over the last year, people are behind this, and we are. The young people are the force for change. We really are. But we've got to keep that momentum up, because I definitely believe, you know, step by step we will make some massive progress here. Yes, it's very true. And look, because like a lot of us are starting to do something about it, we hear something bad happen, and everyone makes a big fuss about it, as they should. I think that also sends a message, because it's saying like, look, this one person's taken his life, and look at the massive impact it's had, both positive and negative. So that could even make one other person think, wow, maybe I shouldn't do this, because look how many people get hurt by it. Look how many lives did it just get derailed because of like what I've done. So the fact that we are making a big fuss of it, and the fact that we're screaming and shouting and saying like this should not be happening, even that in itself could be helping a lot of people as well.
This is the statistic I always struggle to comprehend, is that we have 6,500 suicides every year, which actually, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you could say that's quite a small number. It's not a small number, but in the grand scheme of things, that's quite small. But when you look at the statistics, each one of those suicides, 25 people at least are deeply affected on average. 25 at least deeply affected. So that means like personally, you know, massively traumatic. 25 times 6,500. I don't even know what I left. You know, I've left engineering. Like my maths is terrible, but that's a big number, right? Whatever it is, that's a big number. That's huge. That's every year. That's hundreds of thousands.
I know at least 200 people just affected by Elise's death. That's likewise, and that's like underestimated.
Now imagine that on a 6,500 people a year. It's impossible to imagine how many people are affected by this. And I think it's one of, if not the most important issue that we have to face, because this is just affecting so many millions of people every few years. It's just
and
awful.
it's not like a when someone breaks their arm, it's broken and then eventually it gets fixed and they're fine. But something like a deep mental problem and then dealing with like someone's death is it takes over your whole life and you'll never forget it. And it's such like a long problem that people have to deal with, which is why it's so much more tricky to solve than just like a physical harm. Like physical versus mental, it's a completely different game.
It is. I know we kind of do the comparison between physical health and mental health a lot. We always do, and you always catch people saying that. And I think, for the most part, I think they do go hand in hand quite well. But you're so right. I love it when people say, "Oh, I've broken my leg." It will compare mental health to breaking your leg. I'm like, no, because when you break your leg, you have a cast, and you go into school, and everyone writes on your cast. You don't go with and say, "Oh, I've got depression." Everyone signs your tablets or something. Exactly. It doesn't happen. It's not like that at all. There's such a massive stigma. I would compare mental health more as a sort of mental physical health thing to an STD or IBS. These are heavily stigmatized illnesses. People don't talk about IBS or STDs openly. That's what I compare mental health to. It's so much shame around it, and like we said before, shame is a vicious cycle. Because you have a mental illness, you are then shamed to have that mental illness. You have guilt for having it. It's a vicious cycle. I absolutely do find it quite trivial when people say, "Oh, why can't we talk about mental health like talking about a broken leg?" And in an ideal world, brilliant, that'd be great. But let's not. Let's kind of it's a bit more serious than that. It's a lot more going on. But we do need to get to a point where it is something that we can talk about like that, where you can just say, I'm not doing too well. I also love the idea that we always hear this phrase, "Oh, we've got to normalise mental health, normalise the conversation," and then we'll say that, and then no one will say anything. And it's like the way we normalise mental health is by all of us talking about mental health, not just people that are struggling, or not just talking about when you are struggling.
Everyone.
Bring it into every conversation. If you're asking your mates how they're doing, like making sure, "Oh, how's your mental health?" That's how we normalise this. Normalising that phrase. And also, when we see the talk about your mental health campaigns, and even when I say talk about your mental health, I think the person I'm trying to tell that to is not necessarily the person that's struggling. Because most people know that it's important to talk when you're feeling down. It's important to talk if there's something wrong. When I'm saying talk about your mental health, I'm talking to people that aren't struggling. They are the most important people at trying to change this. Because if we all talk about mental health, even when I'm not struggling, then immediately, as soon as someone is struggling, they go, I can have that conversation.
That's really good.
So when we say talk about your mental health, we're not talking to people that are struggling. We're talking to people that aren't. Right. Okay, you need to have that conversation
so they can help people that are.
So that is how we normalise mental health. Right.
And something that I've just been doing recently since losing my friend is just, I didn't really do this much before, but just randomly just FaceTime with my friends, just like call them up, and just without like, "Oh, should you set a time to call?" You just call them up. If they're busy, they're busy. If they're not, you have a little conversation, and it's just making that a normal thing that everyone does. Everyone's always checking in with each other. Then it just makes it so much harder because you could call someone, they could be like, "Oh, I'm actually having a really bad day," so you just start talking to them, and while that problem's small, it gets dealt with, then it's okay. But if no one's checking in with them for a while and it starts to build up, then it can lead to something much worse. So that's something that I've just personally been doing, and if other people want to do it as well, it'd be great, because it's just every now and then just a quick check in with your mates, because it can make the difference. Or
just a text every week, just be like, "How's things going?" And I think having those more in-depth conversations, that's what we really need to start having, just to check in on people, just check in. And while it's difficult in a balance to say this, because I think so many people might hear that and go, maybe I should have done that in this situation, right? It's difficult, and I certainly questioned that. I should have been like, why didn't I send that text to my brother? Why didn't I check in with him? But we really do, and I don't think anyone can expect themselves to look back and say that, because we just didn't know that was important.
Exactly.
Right? But this is why I think education, this is so important. I know someone that's doing children's books for like 4-year-olds that tackles this. Do you remember like Biff and Chip in school, The Magic Key? All of them like learning to read like The Cat Sat on the Map. Well, she's doing those with like emotions.
Right.
So Biff and Chip go, and Chip's feeling down, and Biff asks Chip how they're doing. And that's how we try and change this, because it's really difficult for us now, with the knowledge we have, to actually do these things, right, and actually have these check-ins. But if a 4-year-old learns from day one that if their mate's looking like this, then they can have this conversation about mental health. Imagine the culture we'd have there. It'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
Definitely.
But I do think checking in is such an important thing, and having those conversations and just picking up on things, but then also knowing that there are services out there that can help. Because I think a lot of people get scared of having these conversations because they don't know how to help.
They feel like it'll be too much. They don't know how to react.
Yeah, it's like, how do I solve this? I don't know what depression is, let alone how to solve it for you. Yeah, it's called being a rescuer, and I'm a rescuer. Like, when someone's in trouble, I'm like, I want to help. Right, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. Right, and with mental health, that kind of puts people off, because they're like, I don't know how to rescue. I don't know how to help you. And really, there's two things, right? The first thing is, the best way you can help someone that is struggling with their mental health is not to offer suggestions. It is to literally just be there for them to talk to you.
Just sit there and listen. Just take it.
Exactly. Absolutely. And the second thing is signposting them to other things. So the shout 85258, text shout to 85258 in the UK. It's free, confidential, it's available 24/7, and it's text based. Something like that is perfect. You can go to the Mind website for loads of information. You can go to an amazing service called Papyrus, which is a suicide prevention for things. So they have a helpline for people that are struggling with their mental health, or for friends and family that know someone that is. There's so many services out there, and sometimes it puts people off, because they're like, I don't want to have that conversation because I don't know what to do. All you have to do is listen, and then signpost if you're worried.
There you go.
And actually there's a third one, is be a friend. And this goes for anyone going through grief as well. Like, I get one of the most common questions I have is like, what do I say to someone that's lost someone? What do I say to them? And I'm like, don't overthink it.
Yeah, there's no real true answer, the perfect answer. You just have to make them know that you're there for them.
Exactly. Be a friend. Be whoever you are to them. That's the most important thing you can do. And it's exactly the same with mental health. If someone you know is struggling, the first and most important thing you need to do is just be whoever you are to them. A friend.
And they know, because you're a friend, there's no judgment there. They can, and if they want to talk about it, they can.
Yeah. And then listen, and then you can signpost. And if you can do that on repeat, bam, that is the best thing you can possibly do.
If everybody does that, then...
Exactly. And that's how we normalise it. And then we have these conversations more often, right? And especially, we're talking to men here. Like, I still struggle to have this conversation with my mates at uni and at home. It's like, how do we actually have those emotional, deep conversations? Because there's still this, like, awkwardness about, I don't know what to say. But the more we have that conversation, the more not only that person you're talking to feels more comfortable, but everyone, it's like an echo. Everyone then feels more comfortable having these conversations. And they are really, really important.
Exactly, yeah. That's an extremely good point. But it's so crazy that, like, everyone knows the statistic of, like, suicide is much higher in men from, is it like 18 to 35 or something. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on why it is between those years, or why do you think that's such a significant time period?
I think mental health goes very closely with pressure. And so, when you're stressed and pressured, then you tend to be more vulnerable to becoming mentally ill, or to develop mental injuries, I like to refer to them as. So ages 18, 35, that is a hot zone for life change. It's a pinch point, right? Leaving university, getting a job, finding employment, getting a house, starting a family. These are massive life changes, and they come with a huge amount of pressure. And so I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. That's the moment where you're given the novel, the Charles Dickens novel, and what do? You can't read the first page. So then you can't, you put it off, and you can't read it, and then suddenly you've got something that's really a problem. So exactly that. The way we deal with this is by teaching people how to read, so that when they get handed that book, they can go, oh yeah, this is fine. I've been taught this. I can do this, and then they've read it, and that's fine, and then they've got that knowledge, right? So I think it is about this pinch point. It's about pressure,
right?
But it's about teaching people that this is pressure, and this is how you can cope with it, and this is mental health, this is emotions, and this is how we deal with them,
right? And to attack that problem early when they're younger, so they have the tools and necessary skills for later on.
Absolutely,
right?
Because I think a lot of schools as well, you get to like sixth form and they'll be like, you're ready for your mental health talk, and you'll go into like assembly and there'll be some speaker in there and they'll do this hour-long session on mental health and they'll be like, we've done our bit, you're educated on mental health. I'm like, no you're not.
And probably a lot of people before 16 years old have already had so many traumatic things happen to them already.
Well, this is it. And also, you know, you don't learn to read in a day. And we are trying to teach people I love this analogy with reading. Like, we are trying to teach people to read. You do not do that in an hour session in an assembly hall. You do that from day one. You hear words, you get stories. You're taught from day 5, from 5 years old. That's what we need to do.
And continuously as well.
Continuously. Yeah. And sometimes people are like, but that's not what school's for. I'm like, the only reason school exists is to prepare you for adulthood in the best possible way. We are doing people a disservice if we are not preparing them by teaching them about emotions. Every single millisecond of every day, you're going to have a thought. Even when you're in sleep, unconscious, you're thinking. Okay, so how can we possibly not teach people about those thoughts? About something that is literally going on every single second of every single day for the rest of their life, and then we're not teaching them about it. I think absolutely the most important thing we need to do going forward is look at our curriculum and look at our education and work in something about mental health from the first day you enter school.
Exactly.
Because that's so important.
And it's crazy because our world is changing so rapidly all the time, and the one thing that seems to have not changed for years is just the school system and how things are taught, what's taught. And it's just like, and especially with social media, which is just a beast that just keeps changing rapidly. Like, nobody has the tools or skills to kind of deal with it because we're in it at the moment. It's going to be time later from now when people look back and say, okay, these are the things kids shouldn't have a phone until they're 12 years old. So and so, like, social media should be for. But because there's so much access to everything now, all this stuff's going on, it's really hard to contain it and even understand it. So I think social media does play like a massive part, and I'm sure you know a lot about that as well.
Definitely. Oh, do you remember getting the social media talks at school? Oh, it's mad looking back. Like, we'd had this old man come in. He's like, "This is Google. They're like, don't type this in. If you have a problem on Google, this is where you go." Oh, that's not helpful, is it?
No.
And I think as well, like, if we were going to teach about mental health in the same way, I think that could actually be more damaging than not teaching it at all. And so I think we've got to be really, really careful about how we teach it, because I do remember back in the day having those technology lessons were just terrible, absolutely terrible. I mean, they didn't even know what Instagram was, these people that teach it, right? Let alone how to stay safe on it. But yeah, I think social media is a weird one for me, because, like, on the one hand, it's an incredible thing, and I wouldn't be near where I am today without it. But also, it's a horrific thing. And I think what people got to remember is Instagram is a tool, not anything else. It's not a lifestyle. It's not something to do. It's a tool. It's something that you can use, right? And I have been very careful, because I used to get it quite wrong. And I think Instagram is, and social media is, what you make it, right? And so I'm very strict, and I've got three things that I do, or 3 people that I follow, or 3 categories that everyone I follow has to fit into. They either entertain me, educate me, or inspire me. And if it's not one of those 3, I'm sorry, you're not in my life, right? You don't, because I think of Instagram as like my home, okay? And if they're not one of those 3 people, you're not going to invite them in. And so if you're not going to invite them into your home, don't let them into your social media, don't let them into that life, block them, do whatever. I think people don't use the block button enough. Like, I'm a serial blocker. I really am. But you have to be, because I think it can be so detrimental, because Instagram is, in essence, a highlight reel of your life.
Yeah.
And I know for my brother, he really found Instagram difficult, because he compared his life with the highlight reel of everyone else's.
Exactly.
And he went, why is my life not like theirs? And I think that when you're in that dark place, it makes it seem like your life is so bad, and it makes you feel bad. So look at your Instagram, look at your social media, and make sure that actually it's a healthy place to be. Because 9 in 10 people, it probably isn't. You get subconscious messages everywhere that you don't need. And
there's a lot of people that you might not even really know that well, and you're still comparing yourself, like, and they could still be judging you. And I don't think the average person is meant to have that much interaction or feedback with thousands of people saying, oh, this is the way to look, this is the way to dress, this is, oh, you're too fat, you're too skinny. Like, nobody should be having that much kind of input from this kind of weird crowd that they don't really know, and so that's to dictate how they live.
I know. It's mad. When else in life would you just stand there and be like, right, who wants to say something next?
Yeah, just sit there.
And I've had it before, like, you say something and everyone's like, saying whatever they want to, and you're like, wow, this is like actually happening. This is strange. We have to be. This is why I like thinking about it in my home. And if you were to say something ridiculous or offensive to me in my home, you're not staying in my home.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's why I'm a serial blocker. Like,
that's a good.
I'll just block.
And I think when it comes to being safe online, like I said, that the old guy came and talked to you about, which wasn't helpful at all. I think the responsibility now lies on the younger generation, because this is the first kind of point in time where it's the kids know more than the adults, and the kids have access to these things that adults have no idea what's happening. So it kind of falls on our shoulders to kind of say like what needs to be done, like how to act safely on it, what you should be doing. Those 3 rules you have is really good 3 rules, and some people should take that on board. I don't think we can't really like look up to our parents, because they literally know nothing about this world. It's our world, and we need to make sure that we're keeping it safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're absolutely right. And also, you know, social media companies need to do far more. They've been very good. You know, the plastics industry has been very good with the recycling, right? In that they have put the responsibility to look after the environment on the consumer, rather than it being on them. And they've done such a good job at making people think it's their responsibility, and it diverts attention away from the fact that they're still producing so much plastic, one single-use plastic. But no one talks about Coke making loads of bottles, right? In the same way, technology companies have been like, here's a block button, here's all this stuff, here's this, you're responsible for this. Whereas they're like, hey, we're Instagram, we're a great company, right? They've got to do more. They've got to do more, because online bullying's on the increase. You know, there's so much that that Instagram, Facebook need to do more of. You know, racism is just absolutely appalling online. And social media companies like, we've given you a block button, it's your responsibility to deal with. No, it's not. Or they're like, those people shouldn't be saying those things anyway.
Yeah, it's just...
Exactly. They're passing that responsibility on. Yeah. I think Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, they need to do so much more for protecting people. And I mean, we saw the other week with all the sports and the blackout of social media, you know, calling for verification of people and identity of people's accounts. Absolutely, that's what we need. Because we cannot have this culture that just stops Instagram, Facebook having responsibility for this, because they think they do. I know I've had conversations with Instagram as well in the past, and they do seem, or the people I've spoken to do seem very receptive to their role in people's mental health, which was positive. But I mean, actions speak louder than words.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, it is so tricky, because, and like I said, it's a tool, so it can be used either way, for good or for bad. And when it comes to, say, like random people, the amount of like random people I've had message me really nice messages about everything that's going on right now has been like overwhelmingly, like I couldn't thank them enough. But like if that was all negative, I don't know how I would feel. So it's just like, it's such a tricky thing to kind of be, okay, well, we're allowed this, but we won't allow this, like if you're not friends with them, or it's just I just don't think we truly understand it. And it is such a new thing that's changing all the time. So it's really hard to put things in place, because it's such a dynamic beast that's happening. We can't put these kind of rigid structures around it, because it just won't really work. So it is really tricky, but I just think people just have to have like a good foundation of like the people we have on there, and what you should be saying, what you shouldn't be saying. But it's just a tricky problem.
And check in on yourself as well. Like, this is something we don't do enough. Is, again, we're talking about the brain. It knows what it wants. If you ask your brain how it's doing in a weird way, then you'll probably get a good answer of if you're okay or not. And I think so many people just check in with yourself every so often. Just have that internal dialogue. Am I doing okay? Do I like this being on Instagram? You know, is that healthy? Is that actually making me feel good? And often you'll probably learn quite a lot if you just sort of take a step back and just actually ask yourself what's going on, if you are feeling okay. And it can go for so many different situations. If you're worried about yourself, you know, just take a step back out of life. Stop distracting yourself for a second and just go, am I alright? And just think about it. And I did, like I said, just be for a second. Just let thoughts just come in and just see what happens. And I think if everyone did that, we'd be so much more aware of how we're doing.
Definitely. Because
I think so many people wait until it gets really bad before they notice that something's wrong.
Yeah, and like you said, it's really hard to know if something's wrong about yourself. So if you're really struggling, then you could ask like a really good mate of you who knows you really well. Yeah. Like, have I changed recently? Am I doing something more that I didn't used to? And they can be like, honestly, as their friend, like, yes, Nathan, you've been doing this a lot more recently, and then just that one message can then start the cogs turn, and you start thinking about.
Yeah, I think people will be surprised at how much other people notice that would be helpful if you ask those questions.
Yeah.
And I think we just got to have more of a dialogue with our friends as well, and just be like, you know, am I okay? Do I seem okay? I'm not okay. Can we talk? Can we call? Whatever.
Yeah.
Let's just be more open about this.
Definitely.
Mental health, it's something we all have, so let's just chat.
Definitely. And one way I like to look at it, someone said once, treat yourself as if it was your friend.
Yeah.
So just, if your friend came up to you and said, oh, I'm feeling this, you wouldn't just shun them away. You'd just say, oh, go away, leave me alone, I don't want to deal with this right now. You'd sit there, you'd listen, you'd give them their time. So treat yourself as you would treat them, and really like be your own friend.
I'm the worst for that. I'm so self-critical, and it's something I'm working on really heavily at the moment. It's like my internal dialogue is always, my whole life, been so self-critical to the point where I feel almost anxious about doing things because I think that other people are thinking a certain thing about me, right? And it's become a problem because I'm like, they're not thinking, oh, that's not going to happen. But I've become so self-critical, that internal dialogue's become so toxic that it's actually quite damaging. And actually, ever so you take a step back and you're like, I wouldn't say that to anyone. You know, why am I saying that to me? And actually, a really good coping mechanism I found that did actually help me in the first few weeks and months after losing the exam was I used to talk in the mirror to myself. Sounds really weird, and it probably looked a bit weird to people I live with, but just having that conversation in the mirror, just talking to that person that's staring back at you, because I just remember thinking there's no one in the entire world that knows me better than that person in the mirror. And so actually it was a really good opportunity to just talk about everything I was feeling out loud to what seemed like another person, which was obviously just me, but it was amazing. It was a really great way of just getting everything off my shoulders without having to go through what is a difficult experience of actually talking to a friend.
Exactly.
And I actually think that was a really, really amazing thing, just to have that conversation. When I wanted to leave uni because I hated my course, that was exactly what I did. I had that conversation in the mirror and I was like, okay, let's go through the options, Ben. Let's see what's going on. Let's have a check-in. And I think we need to do that as well, normalise checking in on ourselves, whether it's out loud in a mirror or not. I don't know.
And
Whatever
the thing
it
about out loud is you're hearing yourself, and then you can start kind of critiquing that, because when it's just in your head, it's more vague, it's hard to, but what I find really helpful is writing things down, or like just on the notes, or just like actually like physically writing them down, and as you write it down you can kind of comprehend it more, and then you can start to figure out the solutions. And people like to illustrate or the mind maps, they can like, or flow charts, to kind of get everything that's from here down into like a visible, easy like thing to look at, and then that can actually really help you start to get through them.
Journaling, it's amazing. The thing is, we just shouldn't be learning about this now. This is what it should be done for a whole life. We should have always had this stuff introduced to us, and that's what I think, you know, how can we possibly expect people to do this and just learn it on themselves? We need people to tell us how this stuff works. If someone had told me about journaling, or someone told me about talking to myself in the mirror back at school, could I have done differently? Could I be healthier now? I don't know. It would have made a massive difference, I imagine. That's why we just need more education on this. 100%. People need to know what mental health is, and they need to know how to look after themselves. The majority of people I speak to have got no idea how to look after themselves, really, and that's bad. And you know there's a problem there.
Definitely. I think another thing is, like we said about journaling and writing things down, but if you're like you don't even have to be an artistic person, but if you do something artsy to kind of express, like you're not good at drawing, but you just start drawing something, and it's kind of like your unconscious coming up a bit, and you're just expressing yourself, and then you can look at it afterwards and be like, oh well, what does this mean, why did I do that? It's just like, it's better than just say like going to the gym and just kind of trying to forget about it by building your muscle. Like if you make a song, like a friend of mine made a song, Andrew, shout out to Andrew, he made a song about Lisa, and I listened to it last night, and it hit me, and it's amazing. I started crying just because you could tell there's pure emotion in that, and it's something different than just like a conversation to you, because it just hits differently. So if you're artistic, or you don't, like I said, don't have to be artistic, just try something that's in touch with your emotions, or you're kind of just like working it through and just seeing like where it leads you.
Yeah, you hear that a lot when you talk to artists as well, when they release albums and singles. It's like they put so much into it. It's like it's almost their therapist. I think it was James Arthur that said that. You know, a lot of his songs were him having a counselling session with himself and just writing it down. And a lot of his songs became so emotional because it was just channeling everything he was thinking about into that. And it's such a powerful thing. And it's the same can be said for poems and things. And just writing it down, putting your thoughts onto a physical page, it's a powerful thing, because up here they're so confusing. down there on a page, it's like, yeah,
Because
that makes sense.
It's you're above looking down, saying, okay, this
Exactly.
is the problem. It's not what happened here.
Exactly.
And people might think like, oh, just writing stuff's now not going to help, but
Yeah.
it does
It
make
does.
a big difference.
Also, it's little things, isn't it? It's doing little things every so often and learning what works for you. Because maybe it doesn't work for you, but maybe meditating does. Maybe
You just got to try.
Exactly.
You have to try.
We've got to try what works for you and try and come up with something that works for you. Yep.
I was going to ask you because I looked on your Instagram and saw that you had been on BBC Radio News and ITV News as well. And so, what happened for you to come across into these like big platforms to tell your story?
I don't know. It's just kind of happened. It's really surreal for me looking back on everything because I can't really understand how it all fell together. So I guess with the sort of the media side of it and actually everything, I always started small. Like I did some articles in the Kent Messenger to start with, and so it's a pretty small newspaper. And then I did a radio interview with Radio Kent, which was quite funny actually because it was at Swallows to the school and I was so excited and all my friends were so excited for this opportunity and like I was there and I remember having I had watermelon socks on that day and I took my shoes off and we were just sat in the IT room just while I was on the phone to radio and we hung up and it was like, oh my god, this happening. And then it slowly over the years just things that like that snowball just falls down and just builds and it builds and it builds. And you'll find that you do, Radio Kent, and then you do something else, and something else will happen, and then so much just happens if you just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And sometimes it feels like you're not going anywhere, and then suddenly you'll meet someone, and they'll introduce you to someone, and then something will happen. And so many things. The Diana Award. I'm so fortunate to have been awarded with a Diana Award. That was just one of the most proudest moments of my life. And that came about through just meeting some people at an event one evening, and I was just having a beer with some people, and they introduced me to this other guy, and that's how I got into all of that. And then I'm a massive believer in just always trying to be friendly with everyone and just try and be friends with everyone, because the amount of people or opportunities I've done that hasn't on the surface been very big, that actually has led to massive, massive things happening. For example, the reason I got to meet the Prime Minister was, if you trace it back, that I got to meet the Prime Minister because I was at the Sun event, because I'd had a conversation with a journalist a while ago, because I was introduced at another event. It starts from really, really small things. It just goes up the chain. And if you're passionate, if you push, and if you actually engage in it, then things just happen. Doors just open. And so I've always just tried my best to do things, and I've just been very, very lucky that certain opportunities have come about. But it is surreal looking back. I'm like,
and you're still crazy. Incredibly young as well. 21 years old. You've already accomplished so much, and I don't know, just a big thank you. I'm sure everyone else, thank you for what you've done. It's just literally amazing, and I know you still got a lot more left in you, and you'll keep going for a while.
Well, I'll try and do what I can, because every time I hear these stories, I'm like, what have we missed? What have we not done? And so
you can't sit back and do nothing. You just
I'm
feel
not the
like
sort of person that can. I'd be very bored.
I feel like when there's a situation that you notice and you don't do anything, and then something bad happens, you feel guilty. You think, well, I could have done something. So I think if you notice something, you kind of have the duty to do something, because if you're not, you're part of the problem. So if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. It's quite a cliche thing to say, but it's very true when it comes to something like this. Like, if you're just sitting back and saying, oh, someone else will deal with it, then who knows, you could have saved a couple of lives just by doing one little thing, but without trying, how would you know? So I think that kind of gives you the motivation to keep pushing forward, to be like, there's a lot of people that need help. If I can just help one person, say you help one person, it has a knock-on effect, because they're now healthier, then they can help someone else, and it's just... And if everyone does that, it's just so good.
It's about that, isn't it? It's the knock-on effect. You impact one person, they impact another friend group, they impact another friend group, and the waves just go out. I think that's all I've tried to do for the last 3 years, is just be the person that drops the pebble into the lake, and just the ripples just go out. I've just tried to be the person that throws the pebble, and that's all I've tried to do. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it looks like it is the case, those ripples are slowly turning to waves.
No, like watching you on Instagram and stuff, and seeing all the good things that you've done, made me realise like the importance or how much one person can do, and you've kind of inspired me to really take this podcasting forward and try and make something out of it, because I don't know, you're kind of leading by example. You've shown that it is possible for like one person to make a big impact. Like you've met Boris Johnson and stuff. Like you've done amazing things, and you're still so young, and I think that can inspire a lot of other people to just take the step, like you said, throw the pebble in and see where it really takes them. So I have to say thank you for that, and thank you for the inspiration given to everyone.
Nice. It's just, honestly, and I really, really mean this, it's an honour. It's just such an honour to be in a position to help, and to be able to try and do something. And I know that you know, in this, what happened to Elisa, and just anything I've been able to do to help, it's just been an absolute honour to have something, you know, try and do something to help, because it's just it hit something really personal in me, and I have to, as a person, I have to do something for this. I don't understand how I could possibly see what's going on with the world, see these suicides happening and not do something. You know, I often hear this from people, it's like, you know, why do you do what you do? I can't believe you do this. I can't believe you put so much time into it. And I'm like, if you had access to my Instagram for one day, and if you read the DMs, and if you read the stories, and if you were in my shoes and you met people, like I met a mum last year, and her 10-year-old son was expelled from school because he attempted suicide and he scared the other kids, and she did not know what to do. If you hear that, I just cannot imagine not doing what I'm doing.
And you can't ignore it.
You absolutely. So honestly, it's a pleasure and an honour to be able to do something to help. And like I said, when I was standing on the steps of Downing Street, I felt that, and I was like, this is real people, and it's the honour of my life to be able to help.
Yeah, well, it's a crazy achievement. Yeah, I think we'll cut it there for the very first episode. I am Ben West, is your Instagram.
I am Ben West.
So you can check that out. So thank you for listening to the first episode of the Purple Heart podcast, and I'll see you next time.